Hello and welcome back. If you could just all take your seats, please, before we start again. And just while we're getting ready for the next session, which, as my colleague Steve mentioned, is with Airbnb, I just wanted to explain a couple of things about what Steve and I do. We're a travel perspective. We're a social media and digital consultancy working with travel and tourism brands around the world, and we've been presenting this social media and startup conference here at WTM for the last 4 years. One thing that we're doing next year, as well as this, I hope, is something called Social Travel Britain 2015, which will be taking place 17th to 19th of April at Sarum College in Salisbury. And you can find details on our website at that address. And it's a conference aimed at looking at how tourism boards and travel marketers in the UK can use digital and social media. A very exciting prospect, I think. You know, we've got so much amazing stuff here in the UK, but I think we're still at the very early stages of how to use social and digital media to promote that. So if you're interested in that, please do register on our site. The second thing I'd just like to quickly mention is something that we've been working with BritMums, the leading parent blogger network. We've set up a collective called Family Travel Perspective. We work very closely with travel bloggers, and this is a very exciting new initiative for us. It's bringing together some of the top parent bloggers in the UK, including Jen Howe, Susanna Scott from BritMums, Kirsty Pelling from the Family Adventure Project, Greta Schifano from Mums Do Travel, Selena Jones from Oh the Places We Will Go, Sarah Ebner from the Family Travel Times, Trish Burgess from Mum's Gone To, and last of all, me and my fledgling family travel blog, Traveling with the Kids. We put this together because we think a lot of travel brands are interested in working with parent bloggers these days. Excuse me. And what we're going to be able to do is put together blogger trips, put together focus sessions, content for your websites, and identifying brand ambassadors for your products, and also how to organize online conversations with them. But that's enough of the sales job from me. Anyway, you're all here to hear my next guest, and that is Olivier Gremillon, who is Managing Director for EMEA for Airbnb. Now, is there anyone who doesn't know who Airbnb is these days? Seems to have been quite it's a word we use too much these days in travel, is disruptor, but it really has been a disruptor, and you can tell it's been a disruptor by the fact that so many people get annoyed about it, particularly vested interests in the travel industry. And now I'm going to sit down and have a 25-minute conversation with Olivier about some of the ideas of Airbnb, where they are, and also about peer-to-peer travel in general and why it is suddenly becoming such a big thing, and what we need to know as marketers and people working in the travel industry. So if you could all give a very warm welcome to my guest, Olivier. Thank you. If we could just change the slide over as well, please. Thank you. Okay, welcome, Olivier, to London.
Thank you.
So, for the people who don't know who Airbnb is, what can you tell them?
So we are a platform that brings together two types of people. First, some guests who are looking for a new way to travel and a new way to find an accommodation all over the world. And then the other piece of the puzzle is the host side. So people who open their home, whether just a room in their apartment or their entire place, and it can be an apartment, a villa, a castle, a private island, whatever you want. And we put these two type of population in contact. And right now we have 800,000 listings available globally in 190 countries. 20 million people have traveled with Airbnb, around 1 million per month on average in 2014. So it's going pretty well.
Thank you. I mean, peer-to-peer, this is a bit of a buzz phrase, isn't it, right now? What does that exactly mean to you, peer-to-peer?
Exactly what I just mentioned, which is we are bringing individuals together through technology when it was very difficult for them to get in touch in the past. So the goal is you are an individual in one side of the world, and you want to go and stay at somebody else's place. The peer-to-peer platform's role is actually to put these people in touch with each other and make sure that they have the experience that they are looking for in terms of authenticity of travel, in terms of practicality in some case. So that's really putting these people in touch with each other.
And do you think it's just technology that's actually driving that? Because, I mean, technology has made it easy for people to speak to each other, to their peers. But do you think there's something else going on? I mean, I talk to a lot of travelers. They're interested in authentic experiences, much more perhaps than they used to. But is there also some economic initiative behind this as well? People looking for something cheaper than perhaps they'd found in the past?
Yeah, so I think all of that are great arguments. So first of all, we didn't invent the renting somebody's place. It's been existing for years and decades and centuries. The thing that we do is making it easy for people to do it. So technology has been a great driver because it's as easy to book a room in a city that is like 10 miles away from where you stay, or on the other side of the world. You look at the same website, you see listings that look like the same in your own language with the same kind of pictures taken the same way, and you can pay in your own currency, and you can message people in the exact same way. So I think what technology brought us is putting in touch people who couldn't get in touch in the past, so technology definitely helps. So the other reasons why Airbnb and peer-to-peer platforms started to work and grow pretty fast in the past few years is obviously the economic crisis helped with that. People on both sides of the equation needed a little bit more money, and so people started to host just because they needed to make ends meet. And it was a good way for them to use one of their most, or in most cases, the most valuable asset they have, which is their home, and make a little bit of money out of it when they actually are not using it. And on the other side, the guests are, very often look for, in many cases, look for a cheaper way of traveling, especially when you travel with kids. And, it's much more convenient to actually have an apartment with several rooms where you can take some of your meals in the apartment than going in other forms of accommodation. But the real trend behind all of that, I think the technology piece and the economic aspect is really something that boosted the development, but the real trend behind it is the search for authenticity, as you said, because people want to travel differently, they want to experience a city differently, they don't want to do necessarily all the touristic stuff that they might be used to, and they want to see other parts of a specific city or of a specific place with the eyes of the local.
Well, it seems that recently we haven't been able to pick up a newspaper or look at a media website without seeing a news headline, a shocking headline about Airbnb or one of the other peer-to-peer networks like Uber, for example. I mean, do you see that as good publicity or bad to have your name out there, attached to tax battles, legislation battles in New York with Uber taxi strikes and blockades? I mean, is that good publicity for you to have that?
Well, any publicity when the article is accurate is, good publicity, I would say. I think the fact that there are a lot of press about us and others is just because people, like the travelers and the host, actually care about that. It's a new way they want to use to travel. That's a new way some of them make money. That's a new way some of them actually meet with the rest of the world. There are some discussions, obviously, on some regulatory questions and tax questions and all of that. But again, this is normal. It's a new type of business. It's a new way of traveling. And it's normal that it moves a little bit the lines, and people, have questions about it. So our role, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here today, is to explain what Airbnb is about and why it's a good thing for the world.
I've got a sort of theory about this. When something as successful as Airbnb comes along, it takes the world some time to catch up with it. People find something interesting and want to use it because it's useful. But then, governments take time to catch up with that and say, well, actually, this is so successful and it's affecting some of the businesses in our economy. Maybe we need to level the playing field. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, so in many cases, there is no regulation whatsoever about home sharing or short-term rental or whatever you want to call it. So at some point when a phenomenon like this starts to grow a little bit, that's actually pretty natural that you need to put a framework around it. In some cases, there are some regulations that exist, but they date back like several decades, 50 years in some cases. Internet didn't even exist at that time. So the fact that some of these regulations need to be refreshed and take into account the evolution of the way people travel on one side but live on the other side is pretty natural. So we have discussions with governments all over the world, whether at the national level or at the local level, about a lot of these discussions, whether it's tax, planning, tourism, whatever it can be.
Do you think that people power is now in the ascendancy as a result of the internet and platforms like yours, in the same way that it has been with politics? Putting Barack Obama in power, for example, using the power of digital media, and that's the voice of the people. I mean, do you think that we reached a tipping point where the people power actually was in the ascendancy as opposed to the brand power of the past? The hotel chains and accommodation providers.
Yeah, again, there is a phenomenon where both sides of the equations win, whether it's the traveler or the host. And obviously, when you start to have millions of people using that kind of services, they obviously have a voice, and they want to make sure that they can participate in this new kind of economy. And again, one of the reasons why we have, in most cases, very friendly discussions with governments is because what we do is inherently good. When you leave your place for 2 weeks because you're on vacation, the fact that somebody is going to stay at your place for these 2 weeks and you make a little bit of money out of it, nobody can object anything to that, right? It's something that's good. We are using the assets that exist in a better way. Some people find a nice way to stay more authentic, and the others are making a little bit of money to pay for their own vacation.
Now, I'm always interested in corporate mission statements. I mean, you look at Facebook, it says it wants to give people the power to share. I mean, some would argue that perhaps it wants to have the power to share their data with paying advertisers. Google originally said it didn't want to be evil, but now it says it wants to organize the world's information. What do you think Airbnb's mission statement is or should be?
Yeah, so we're a 6-year-old company, and it took us quite a bit of time about talking about our values and our mission statement and things like that. And what we came up with is we want to create a world where you can belong anywhere. And what we mean by that is whether you live in London and go to Thailand or wherever else you go, we want you to feel at home. Meaning that we want to provide you a service that is easy to use anywhere you are, and then have somebody on the other side that will bring you the hospitality that you want, so that you can feel at home, when you go and travel somewhere. So that's really what we are about, making sure that people feel that they belong anywhere, wherever they go.
I think that leads quite nicely into the next question that I've got for you. You want people to feel at home, but it's very difficult when you're somebody sort of having an overarching platform over lots of individual people renting out their homes to have a consistent level of service provision that perhaps a Marriott or something may be able to tell their individual property owners. I mean, is it a fair criticism to say that you may or do have service issues?
So the fact that our offering is not standardized is a fair statement. That's true, and that's actually why people use Airbnb, because in many cases, they don't want a standardized offering. They are looking for different travels every time they travel on Airbnb, because they see different people who welcome them. They see different parts of the cities, and they see different apartments because somebody is living in there. So do we have a standardized offering? No. Do we have service level issues? I don't know. I've heard that yesterday there was a study released here saying that people using that kind of accommodation, 86% of them were pretty satisfied with what they are doing. So it seems people are happy with the service that's provided.
I remember seeing there was one property where the owner of the property said that they would welcome anybody as long as they spent an hour with their children telling them all about where they'd come from and what they did, which I thought was fascinating. So a lot of the headlines we've been talking about, a lot of the headlines this year for you have been about your new logo. You rethought that. I mean, it's always a difficult one for a brand, isn't it? You know, spending money on a rebrand, coming up with a new logo. And there's been lots of criticism about what it looks like. So what does it look like to you, and what is it supposed to look like?
Yeah, so the reason why we change our brand identity is because the company has evolved, the service has evolved, our community has evolved as well, and we thought that we wanted to have a different way to actually show what we were. If we talk about the logo by itself, what it means and the way we built it was there are a little bit of different components. There is places you can see in the logo, like a specific place. You can see love, because if you return it, you see a heart. It can be seen as an A, like for Airbnb. So there are a lot of thinking that we put into that. Obviously, we were expecting some of the reaction that happened when we released it, and the fact that people embraced the logo this way, whether in a positive way or in a negative way, we find it a good thing, because it meant that people talked about it. And honestly, even some of the criticism we had, some of them were actually pretty funny. So we try to keep with the funny part of it and build on that on social media, for instance. But it was definitely an interesting moment for us.
Now, you launched Airbnb for Business this year. I remember talking to you last year about the number of business travelers who are actually using it. It was quite a surprising number. It was something like 10% of bookings were actually with business travelers, which is not necessarily what you'd expect. I just wondered if you could talk about what attracts business travelers to you, but also whether those deals that you've done with the likes of Concur on sort of automated expense management for business travelers, does that mean you've sold out?
So I don't think so, but so the reason, again, we didn't go and look for specifically for business travelers. It's just at some point we made a survey and we found out that 10% of the travelers were booking for business reasons. And again, it's not your typical word warrior who would check in 5 hotels in 5 days every week, right? There is a convenience that the staying in a hotel brings you when you're actually doing that very often for a short period of times that we will never be able to compete with. Why people use Airbnb for business travel is for, you have a lot of different use cases. So whether it's because you come to a conference like this, for instance, and you don't have any hotels because all the hotels are fully booked, and that's how we got, how Airbnb was created in the first place in San Francisco, because there was a design conference and basically all the hotels were fully booked and our founders just welcomed people in their own home. So that's one use case. Another use case is because people are mixing these days business travel with vacations and holidays after or during. They don't necessarily come alone on business travel. They come with their spouse and kids, and it's just more convenient for the reasons we were mentioning earlier to have an apartment than staying in another sort of accommodation. And then you have a lot of other use cases. People traveling to their headquarters when they work from home most of the time and wanted to get together instead of staying in different parts of the city. So there are a lot of reasons. People use it for meetings. If you do an offsite with your team, you have different options. One is you book a place with a nice view on Airbnb, and it makes a different kind of meeting altogether. So.
Now, you're working with Concur on this, and they've obviously seen the value of working with you. And I know that you've had different projects with other companies in the travel sector, such as Ostrovok in Russia. And I'm sure there are people in this room who don't want to kill you, the hotel chains, but there are some other people who would be really happy to partner with you. I mean, how do you actually do that? How would somebody in this room partner with Airbnb?
Yeah, so we look at a lot of different partnerships. We are very often quite picky on the types of travelers, of partners, sorry, but the goal is to make something very often easier for our community. So one example, the Concur deal, is a lot of people are using it to travel on business, but there were some issues with expense management and stuff, and just doing a deal with Concur or opening our platform to some companies who want to sign up for it makes the life of the travelers as well as their company easier. So that's the kind of partnership we're looking into. The Ostrovac deal that you mentioned is a good way for Ostrovac to provide a different type of accommodation option to their users. And for us, it's a good way to tap into a pretty interesting growing market that is Russia. So we look at a lot of different partnerships for a lot of different reasons. Obviously very open to any discussion.
Mm-hmm. Now, so that's opened up Russia to you. Can you talk about any more of your plans for expansion or what you're doing in the future and what we can expect?
Yeah, so in terms of geography, we obviously are a US company. Originally, we started in San Francisco. Last year, we announced that more than 50% of our business now was in Europe. So even if we're an American company, we're a European-based business, which many people don't know about us. So obviously we're expanding still in Europe. We have 8 offices across the region, including one in Moscow, for instance. And the region is growing pretty fast. We're looking into new regions as well. We have a pretty big focus on Asia these days and developing the market there. So definitely looking into new geographies, new segments of the travel business, as well as potentially other things, a lot of things in the pipeline. So.
Now, our sessions this afternoon, a lot of them are focused on startups, and you were a startup once, but these days, whenever you go to an elevator pitch with a startup, they always say things like, oh, we are the new Airbnb of X or the Uber of Y. And in fact, when we had Lee McCabe from Facebook talking yesterday here, he was calling that Uberification, that whole thing about startups. I mean, do you find that flattering or a bit annoying, actually?
But it's pretty flattering of the fact that people want to start business on this model, which means that people use this word just as a way to describe the sharing economy or the collaborative consumption, and just being I'm the Airbnb off is a shortcut to explain a little bit what they do. Especially when six years ago, when our founders were pitching the ideas to VCs, for instance, everybody thought they were crazy and they had a lot of troubles to raise money. The fact that people in the startup scene right now are using that to actually raise money is actually pretty ironic, and it's pretty flattering, let's say.
And these startups in the audience, I'm sure they'd like to know what your secret sauce is. Does that actually exist, or was it just that you were in the right place at the right time, do you think?
I think there is a timing component to that. Definitely the fact that we started, again, like at the beginning of the economic crisis helped in a way. The fact that our founders are not business people, they are designers, had a pretty big impact on the way they thought about Airbnb and how to develop it. So definitely this was something that was not very good when they were pitching VCs at the time, but ended up being a pretty big difference for us. One of the advice that Paul Graham from Y Combinator gave our founders a few years back was do things that don't scale, and it's better to have 100 people who love you than 1,000 who kind of like you. And I think we're still using some of this every day. And sometimes we do things that have no economic sense whatsoever, will never scale, but help us understand what is coming next. One of the good examples that we're actually still doing today is our founders, one of the first expense they had was to rent a camera just to take nice pictures of the places that they were visiting, the hosts where they were. And to these days, we're still providing free photography to hosts who want them in most of the cities globally. We have 3,000 photographers across the globe, and somebody could come to your place, take pictures, put them on the website. You have very nice pictures with their Airbnb logo on this, and it's a good way for you as a host to actually showcase your place. This economically is, especially when you're a young startup with no money, it costs a lot of money to put in place. But I think that's one of the things that differentiating us very early in the process, because we had nice pictures on the website and the UI was actually very nice. So doing things that don't scale and making sure that your community loves you are two things that we're still using today that have proven pretty successful.
Now, I'd like to open up the question to the audience. So if we could have the house lights up, please, and maybe there's a roving microphone going around. Now, I don't know if anybody has a question. If you want to raise your hand and say who you are, and be polite, particularly if you're a hotel chain.
Just on this, obviously we're meeting a lot with hotel chains and hotel groups, and the discussions we are very friendly. A lot of them want to learn about what we do, how we do it, and what we see as trends. So it's not a war between hotels and Airbnb in no way. So just wanted to mention that. But if any of you are hoteliers, I'm happy to answer questions.
So please.
Hi, my name's Rob. I work for a company called WeSwap, and we do a peer-to-peer currency exchange platform. Just keen to understand what you think the relevance is for peer-to-peer with other sections of the travel industry in particular. Are there any other areas that you think are ripe for exploitation for the same model?
Yep, so we might have been on a panel together in London a few months ago, but I can't see you very well, so I don't know if it was you or somebody else on your team. So I think the sharing economy can apply to many different things. I know yesterday there were mentions around dining with locals and people going peer-to-peer platforms to actually bring people who want to cook for you and people who want to have dinner with the locals. So that's one example that has been developing in the past few months and years. There are a lot of different categories. Obviously, ride sharing is one that is pretty successful these days. Car sharing is another one. Swapping money is, I think, a good example as well. Every time where you can actually bring individuals together and you make something that is whether more efficient or reduces the cost in one way or another, I think there is quite a bit of potential there. So you can use the same kind of model of bringing people together for a lot of different things. I think one thing that makes some models more successful than others is the price and how much, what is the total value of your booking in a sense. Because the higher this can be, the more people will be interested in it. The better you can manage some of the customer support costs, the transaction fees, and all of that stuff. So there is a minimum of transaction amount that I guess you need to have in order to make the business economics work, I would say.
And just out of interest, did you, when you were setting up the company, did you ever call yourself the Airbnb of currency exchange? He doubts it. Do we have any other questions in the audience? There's one just at the front here in the central aisle. Could you just put your hand up again, please?
My name is Xavier Gajani. I'm a hotelier from Israel. Regarding the legal aspects of the activity of Airbnb, do you, in one of the countries of Europe, do you have maybe they found a solution to the legal aspects? What criticizing about the black market and things like this. Maybe one of the countries they found a solution for the tax aspect or other aspects. So maybe we can learn from that.
Yeah. So again, there are a lot of different pieces of discussions with regulators in all countries. Tax is one of them. Planning is another one and stuff. So I can take many different examples, like in Denmark, in Amsterdam, in Hamburg, and there are some discussions in London right now that are pretty interesting as well. I can use the example of Paris. I'm French, so it's a little bit easier. what's happening in France is there are a series of discussions that we're having with the government on these issues in the different cities in France. One of them at the beginning was what is legal and what's not. And what the parliament came up with was if you rent your primary residence, the one in which you live in all the time, you can basically rent it when you are not there. You don't need any authorization of any sort. You don't need to do anything in particular to actually rent it. If it's your secondary residence, in most cases, no issue at all either. In some cities, the cities can actually put a specific regulation saying it's not that it's illegal, it's just that you need to ask a specific authorization to be able to do it. So that's one of the system where people differentiate between people doing that in their own home, which honestly, globally, most people don't have any issue with, and people doing that in their secondary residence or when they buy actually apartments just to do that. And having some kind of regulation for this last piece in particular to make sure that people don't buy entire buildings to actually do a business out of it, or if they do, that they have a proper authorization is a good way to do it. Other discussions we're having right now with the government is around taxes and tourist tax. How do you make sure that people pay the tourist tax or collect the tourist tax from the travelers when they come and remit the money to the different city halls? Obviously, this tax already exists and people already have to pay for it. One of the things we're discussing is how can we improve the collection with Airbnb collecting on behalf of the hosts so that it's much more simple, it's much simpler for the host. He doesn't have to go into taking €1 here and 50 cents there and remitting a check of €12 to the city hall that the city hall doesn't really want to receive anyway because it costs more money to actually receive this check than actually the money you give them. So we are going to collect, one thing that we could do is collect on behalf of the host and remitting in a bulk to the different cities directly. So there are a lot of different things we can do to accommodate some regulation questions or some tax questions in many different places.
Thank you for that. We have time for just one more question if there's anybody with one. No? Just over here on stage right. If you just put your hand up again if they haven't seen you, sorry. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. We are a home manager from Spain and Andalusia, and they've just brought up a new legislation. It started on the 31st of October, where all the holiday apartments have to be registered, have to have a license number, otherwise they'll have to be removed from all the websites. Airbnb, holiday lettings, HomeAway, the owner's website. Are you going to do something about it? Are you going to remove the apartments that don't have the license, or are they going to stay there?
So the question is a little bit similar to the one I just answered. Is there are differences being a professional who actually have apartments, and in some cases several apartments, and having to register and having to have some specific rules and whatever, and having another part which is, hey, I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks, can I put my place on Airbnb? So some of the discussions we're having in Spain is, can we differentiate these two models between being a professional renter and being an occasional one, that somebody who does that in their primary residence, what we call home sharing. So these discussions are still ongoing. Obviously, we think that everybody everywhere should be allowed to rent their place when they are not using it for a short period of time. We'll see how the discussion goes with Spanish authorities.
Great. Well, thank you for listening intently, and thank you to Olivier for sharing those thoughts with us on peer-to-peer travel, and I'm sure you'll stick around for a couple of minutes if anybody has a specific question. So thank you very much. Give me a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.